Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here to talk about The Crane Husband by Kelly Bardhill. I don't think our main character has a name in this book, but it's written in first person. She is a 15-year-old girl whose dad, I can't remember if he died or he died, I think, 6 years ago. And so she's been left with her mother and her younger brother, Michael. And her mom has basically been useless during this time. Our narrator is in charge of everything, always has to take care of Michael, make sure that there's food on the table. Her mom is an artist, but like kind of a struggling artist. And her mother has brought home many lovers over the years, but one day she brings home a 6-foot crane and says, "This is your new father. You will call him Dad, Father." And then Mom starts acting really weird, and our narrator can't quite figure out what's happening. There is a myth or the legend of crane wives. I don't know what culture that comes from, but there's a quote that says, "Mothers fly away like migrating birds. This is why farmers have daughters." So you're following this girl whose family used to be farmers, but the government has shut down all of the farms, like the family farms. Everything is government farms now. There's a lot of eyes on them, and her mother just really retreats into herself after her husband dies. She brings home this crane, and then her mother just continues to be obsessed with this crane and continues to be as absent as ever. And our narrator is trying to basically snap her mom out of it and like save her mom and keep her mom with her. This was a beautiful book. It was written so beautifully. It was so powerful. I listened to it as an audiobook and I really enjoyed it. The narrator was great. And again, it was so moving and beautiful, and you really felt for this character trying to be the mother to her brother, and that's not her job. And you feel the grief and the power dynamic between her and her mother, and trying to get her mother to understand that she needs to live, her mom needs to live for her and her brother, not this crane. Anyway, it was a great book. I'm glad that I read it. It was one that I had pulled out of my TBR jar. I had heard about it from, I believe, Elliot Brooks on YouTube. And again, I'm just so glad that I finally read it. It was wonderful. If you're looking for like a folktale retelling, I highly recommend this one. But now I want to know, have you read this book? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye. Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here to talk about The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah. In this book, you are following 13-year-old Lenny. Her dad was in the Vietnam War and was a prisoner of war and has now come back to the United States. And ever since then, he's been a little bit off, as anyone who's come back from a war would be. This family is very poor. They move around a lot to evade taxes, and when they can't afford where they're living, they travel around a lot. This book is set in the 1970s, and one day her dad gets a letter from the father of someone who served in the army with him. And this man is saying that his son would like to gift our family his son's land and property and house in Alaska. So the dad packs up the family, takes everything out of savings, and they move up to Alaska. And again, this is in the 1970s. This is in the middle of nowhere. Alaska is very, very unpopulated and still still pretty backwoods. There's not a lot happening in this tiny town in Alaska. They get there in around May, and all the citizens of this town keep saying, "You need to start preparing for winter now. Winters are really long, and basically Your first Alaskan winter proves whether you can last here in Alaska or not. So Lenny is just this 13-year-old girl who her whole life is uprooted, moved to this small town in Alaska. Her dad is kind of going crazy, and like gets real doomsday-y. He just descends into madness. There's also, he's not very nice to his wife. And Lenny finds out about that, encourages her mother to leave, and of course she's like, I can't, I just love him too much, is usually what happens in DV situations. So basically, you're just following Lenny as she has her formative years in Alaska. I liked this book. It reminded me very much of The Glass Castle, in that is also about a family who comes and goes into money, moves around a lot, grew up very poor. Obviously this one is fiction versus The Glass Castle is not. There is an author's note. Apparently Kristen Hanna did grow up part of her life in Alaska. So some of this, while not exactly autobiographical, it was written from experience of growing up in Alaska. Again, I liked this, but it was also like, Kristen Hanna has a tendency to just like beat down on her characters, where it's like, something happens, we get through that, oh no, something worse happens, we get through that, oh no, something even worse happens. It's like, anything bad that could happen happened to Lenny and her mom. And it gets really depressing to read about that. Fiction books and historical fiction like this are not really my thing anyway. So I enjoyed it. I like Kristen Hanna's writing, but she has not turned into a favorite author of mine. I don't really have any desire to read any of her other books. I am glad I read this one. It was interesting. It was just, I don't know. It was too much beat down, and it was kind of depressing. But I know a lot of people like Kristen Hanna. I know a lot of people like The Great Alone. And so you may have a completely different experience than I did, but that's the last Kristen Hanna book that I read. And again, I don't foresee myself reading anymore, at least in the near future. So now I want to know, have you read this book? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye. Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here to talk about So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. In this book, you are following Sloane. Her birthday is coming up and she is having a really hard time with it. She's having a hard time coming to grips with getting older. Her husband surprises her with a weekend trip to this like cottage thing with her best friend. She finds out that her best friend, Naomi, who is in Europe, is coming to spend the weekend with her. They're going to this cabin in the woods, but like a resort cabin in the woods, in the snow. This is also in the winter. When Sloane and Naomi are at this cottage cabin resort, they go to town and they meet these weird people who are very nice but also very weird, and decide one night to go to a party that these people are hosting at their house. And once they get there, they realize it's basically like a love fest. They're all together. They're all having a good time together. And Sloane is like, what is happening here? Then they find out that there's also a man being held captive in this house, and some crazy stuff happens, and they find out that this is a group of vampires who are having a love fest. So basically, then it just goes off the rails. They are running and hiding from these vampires and trying to get away from them. I don't know. This book, Rachel Harrison's writing is really hit or miss for me. I wanted it to be so much more. I didn't like Naomi. I thought that she was annoying. She was peer pressuring Sloane into things all the time. I didn't really like Sloane. It was all, I don't know. I know that Rachel Harrison writes like good for her feminine rage books, and that's great, but I just don't really care for her writing. She and I just don't seem to get along. And I'm glad I read it. It was a different take on vampires, kind of. I like reading different monster stories by Rachel Harrison. This just is probably my least favorite out of all of hers that I've read. But if you're looking for a different take on vampires, or if you're looking for a horror book that's set like in the winter in snowy settings, you could check this one out. It just wasn't for me. But now I want to know, have you read this book? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.